What if I told you the country with the largest oil reserves in the world is also one of the most sanctioned nations on Earth? Not Saudi Arabia, not Iraq, not Iran. It's Venezuela. So the question is simple. Why is the United States so deeply involved in Venezuela's crisis? Is it about democracy, human rights, or is it something much more valuable? Oil. Let's break it down step by step. Venezuela sits on over 300 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, the largest in the world. For decades, this oil made Venezuela one of the richest countries in Latin America. American oil companies were deeply involved. The U.S. bought Venezuelan oil. Venezuela earned dollars. Everything worked smoothly. But that relationship didn't last forever. In 1999, Hugo Chavez came to power. And Chavez believed one thing very strongly. Venezuela's oil belongs to the Venezuelan people. So he did something bold. He nationalized the oil industry, reduced control of U.S. oil companies, increased oil sales to China, Russia, and Cuba, used oil money for social programs, not foreign investors. From Venezuela's perspective, this was economic independence. From the U.S. perspective, this was a huge loss of influence. A country with massive oil, saying no to Washington and partnering with America's rivals. That changed everything. After Chavez, and later Nicolas Maduro, Venezuela was no longer treated as a partner. Instead, it became a dictatorship, a threat to democracy, a failed socialist state. Now, some of these criticisms may have truth, but here's the key point many people miss. Countries without oil rarely receive this level of attention. The problem wasn't just politics. The problem was who controls the oil. Instead of tanks or bombs, the U.S. used a modern weapon, economic sanctions. These sanctions blocked Venezuela from selling oil freely, cut access to U.S. dollars, froze foreign oil assets, prevented spare parts for refineries. The result? Oil production collapsed, the economy crashed, inflation exploded. Ordinary people suffered the most. Critics argue, sanctions weakened Venezuela so the government would collapse and oil control could return. Supporters argue, sanctions were meant to punish corruption and authoritarianism. But one fact is clear, sanctions hit oil first. In 2019, the U.S. took a dramatic step. It recognized Juan Guaidó as Venezuela's president, not Maduro. At the same time, Venezuelan oil assets were frozen, foreign buyers were pressured to stop imports. Talks of transition government began. Why does this matter? Because a pro-U.S. government could reopen oil fields to Western companies, restore oil exports to the U.S., reduce China and Russia's presence. So critics say this was less about democracy and more about oil access. Now let's be clear. This story is not only about oil, it's also about global power influence in Latin America, competition with China and Russia, controlling energy supply chains. In simple terms, oil is the prize, control is the strategy, Venezuela is the battlefield, without bombs. This is how critics summarize the situation. Venezuela has oil. The U.S. wants influence over that oil. Venezuela said no. So pressure replaced partnership. No invasion, no war declaration, just sanctions, politics, and economic force. So, is the U.S. wrong? Is Venezuela's leadership innocent? The truth lies somewhere in between. But one thing is undeniable. Oil changes how powerful nations behave. And as long as Venezuela sits on the world's largest oil reserves, it will never be left alone. If you enjoy simple, honest explanations about geopolitics and global power, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Because understanding the world is the first step to not being controlled by it.